All right. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to another Third Place Books virtual author event. My name is Kalani. I am the store manager at the Ravenna location, and I am so pleased to be welcoming all of you to this evening's author event between Paula Becker and Donna James. For those of you who might not be familiar with Third Place Books, we are an independent bookstore in the Seattle area with 3 locations, and we very much sorely miss hosting these author events in person. But at the same time, we're very thankful to be having this virtual platform that brings author events into all of your own homes all across the world. So thank you again for tuning in and supporting us as an independent bookstore. I will be sharing some links throughout the event over in our chat box where you can buy Paula's book and support us as a bookstore and support our authors by making sure you buy your copy of Paula's book. While you are on our website, I encourage you to please browse around. It's a newly redesigned website, so please take a look at our events calendar. We've got a lot of other great author events coming this fall. Just to highlight a couple other events that we have in the coming days. This Saturday night, October 9th, we are hosting an event with Hunter Shobe and David Banas for their book, Upper Left Cities, a cultural atlas of San Francisco, Portland, and Seattle. I've got a copy right here. I've been flipping through it. Very cool book. It makes a great holiday type of book for the fan of maps and geography and West Coast city history. And then on Tuesday, October 12th, we have Molly Hashimoto for the release of her new book, Mount Rainier National Park, an Artist Tour. Got one of Molly's previous books here. Got another great Seattle artist and author. So please take a look at those books and coming author events. We've also got the Jonathan Franzen and Maria Semple in Conversation partnered ticketed event on October 12th as well. So again, just check out our website, thirdplacebooks.com, to learn about these events. And please also stay in tune with our social media channels at Third Place Books. So I'll be introducing our authors here, but I also want to point out our Q&A and chat box function. I encourage you to please follow along with our event and stay engaged. You can ask our authors a question. Please use this Q&A window at the bottom. We also have turned on our live transcript button at the bottom for those of you who might be interested in that. And then finally, as you may have experienced, and with all these virtual gatherings, technical issues may arise. So if they do, we'll do our best to resolve them very quickly. So thank you for your patience and understanding. And thank you for sticking with us during this virtual era of author events. It is because of you that we have this author series, and we have great viewers and great support throughout Seattle, throughout the country. So again, thank you, thank you, thank you. So tonight I am very excited to be hosting this author discussion with Paula Becker and Donna James. This is actually my 3rd time hosting an event with Paula, and I thank her for her continued support of independent bookstores. Paula, of course, is celebrating the recent release of her new book, A Little Book of Self-Care for Those Who Grieve. It's an absolutely beautiful book that offers a gentle guide for surviving the early days of grief. I have read it and can confirm what a meaningful, powerful book. And it's got some absolutely gorgeous illustrations by the illustrator Rebekah Nichols. Paula's previous book, A House on Stilts, Mothering in the Age of the Opioid Addiction, was a finalist for the 2020 Washington State Book Awards. And Paula has also authored many, many different essays documenting all aspects of Washington's history, where you can view them over at historylink.org, the online encyclopedia of Washington State history, where she is a historian. And tonight, Paula is joined in conversation with Donna James. Donna is a psychotherapist for individuals and couples and is also a poet. In the consulting room and on the page, she works with stories of affliction, spasms of hope, and evidence of resilience that are peculiar to the human psyche, moving them toward integration and transformation. So with that, I will now be hiding myself, muting myself, and please take it away, Paula and Donna.
Thank you so much, Kalani. I am thrilled to be at Third Place Books again. And I have to say, I'm just going to picture that we're in the Ravenna store and all of you all are gathered in that space, which has been an important place to me over the years, both as a reader and as an author. And I appreciate Third Place Books' long-term support of my career. Also would very much like to thank Donna James, who, in addition to being a wonderful psychotherapist and a beautiful poet, was also my next door neighbor for more than 20 years. And as such, we have been witness to one another's lives in quiet ways and also large ways, and have supported each other. And I'm very appreciative to have this conversation with her tonight. I'm really looking forward to it. So I would be remiss not to thank my publisher, Girl Friday Books. They've been wonderful to work with. Their titles are really exciting, and I encourage you to look into them and try some of those out. They were able to find for this book the artist Rebekah Nichols, who Kalani mentioned. Rebekah is an artist living in Austin, Texas, and works in watercolor. I really had hoped that this book would have illustrations exactly like this. Gentle, beautiful pictures that someone who maybe had not slept for days or who had been crying could put their eyes onto these pictures and be comforted by them. And that's exactly what they turned out to be. So I'm really grateful for that. I'd also like to say that there's a wonderful audio edition of this book that's available on all the audio platforms. It's narrated by Heather Henderson, who is a friend of mine and a very well-known voice actor. She has voiced hundreds of books, and it's just right. And I think the kind of thing that may be used in a meditative way, played repeatedly, and possibly during those early morning hours when it's sometimes hard to get back to sleep when grief is surrounding us. I also would really, really like to thank all of you who are here today with us in this virtual room. And I want to especially acknowledge the presence of those of you, people who have been bereaved and who are grieving. I know that many of us fall into that group. And I'd like to just honor and remember those who we have lost, and say about your lost loved person what I say about my son Hunter, which is, I remember you. So we remember you. So how we're going to go with this evening is that I'm going to just talk for a little bit and read to you briefly from the book. It will be brief because it is, as the title indicates, a little book, and the whole book can be read a page at a time, or it could be read through, probably in about 20 minutes if I read it aloud to you. So I'm just going to read a little bit. And then we'll talk, Donna and I, and I'm looking forward to fielding the questions that she has for me and having discussion. And then we'll leave about 15 minutes at the end of the program for question and answer. And I really hope you guys will ask me questions. I like that part of it very much. So I'm just going to start by reading the introduction to this book and the first little section. And then I think that so part of that is kind of self-explanatory about why I wrote the book. I'm going to be skipping around just a little bit. Preface. On June 29th, 2017, my 25-year-old son, Hunter, was killed. The shock of Hunter's death instantly deadened me. I curled into the couch corner, moving little. When movement became inescapable, my body pressed thickly through what was now an unfamiliar landscape. I had no appetite, but could not quench my thirst. I had at first little information. My thoughts skittered randomly, unable to form a pattern. Days and nights were marked by how many of them had passed since Hunter's death. Eventually, I blindly reached for books to help me understand how to navigate the grief engulfing me. I did find books, but they were too wordy for my shattered attention span, too big to carry easily, to be a touchstone. I wanted a guide, short, prescriptive, realistic, a book to help me help myself, to help me live within my new bereaved reality. A little book of self-care for those who grieve began as notes scratched out over many midnights, thoughts formed as I lay sleepless or in the aftermath of painful dreams. This book aims to be a hand to hold for others who are grieving. Reader, it is for your support. Read it straight through or read a page a day. Turn to it when you need to. I hope its words will lift and carry those who read them as surely as the grieving reader carries the book. A little book of self-care for those who grieve. Someone is gone. They will not come back. Weep, scream, hate, disbelieve, go numb. Breathe. Rage. Breathe. Curse God or gods. Beg God or gods. Breathe. Remember. Feel it, what you feel. Let it be. Sit with it because you have no choice. Sit with it. Let it be. This is the only work. Breathe. Add lemon to your water. Sip. Eat something if you can. A little is okay. There is no right or wrong way to feel. There's just how you feel. Feel. Breathe. Be kind now. Kind to you. Grief hurts in every way. It hurts your body. Sometimes sensation comforts when words cannot. Water against skin as you stroke through. The weighty quilt, more frayed than whole, your great-grandmother pieced decades ago. Mug, hot from tea. Bowl, warm from soup. Not everyone has been initiated into grief. Friends may not know what to say. Your grief may frighten them. This is okay. Their fear is not your work. Your work is you. Time may feel strange, unreal, or hyperreal. Tasks will present themselves. Plan his memorial. Write her death notice. These may seem monumental, impossible. They may seem like a precious chance. Plan what you can if that feels right. Ask for help if help is what you need. Friends, family gather, a flock of angels supporting you, remembering the one you've lost, who they have also lost. In church, at park, by grave site, over the internet, Their presence may be physical or virtual, but it is real. Mourn, rely, retell, remember. Maybe the gathering does not fit what you planned. Someone important to you doesn't come. Someone says something that feels wrong to you. Your grief has made you raw, shortened your patience. Being confronted again with the reality that you control so little may feel especially cruel now. Notice your disappointment, your rawness. These things are. So I'll stop there. You kind of get the rhythm of it. We start with just a few words on each page, and we make sure that there's always lots of white space, picture for your eyes to go to, thoughts that can be taken in a bit at a time if that's what works the best. And again, even some of the pages that don't have specific illustrations just have these beautiful washes of color. I think it's hopefully comforting and really helps the person reading it, or a grieving person, make their grief feel seen, which is the biggest point of the book. So, Donna, I'll turn it over to you, or jump on in the pool.
Well, we'll go back and forth. Thank you so much for inviting me to have this conversation with you. I'm just delighted to be here with you. So, in a recent conversation you and I had, you mentioned how you believe that uh, the work, the book, the essay, the poem, whatever, chooses the writer. And I think in your preface, you began to talk about how this book chose you. I wonder if you have more to say about that.
Sure. Yeah. The phrase that I always use, because of course my kids were those lucky kids who came of age right as the Harry Potter books were actually being published. So, waited in the bookstores until midnight when the books would be released, everybody dressed as wizards or Dementors. And so I always use the Harry Potter phrase, which is the wand chooses the wizard. And I do truly believe that the wand chooses the wizard, or the project chooses the person, which is not to say that you can't, get an assignment and write for pay. And I've done plenty of that for History Link. But I think that the book projects, and this book especially, was a book that felt like it was going to manifest, and it wanted me to help it manifest. My Betty McDonald bio was a real passion project that was years and years and years of research, and me running around with jazz hands until I got everybody in my whole circle, including the publishing world, excited again about Betty McDonald. And A House on Stilts, the memoir. Similarly to this, I wanted other parents who were suffering through the agony of a beloved child's battle with drug addiction to feel that they were not the only one. Because when we were going through that, I often felt that other people's lives looked like they were a lot more pulled together than ours was. Probably they weren't, but I felt that way at the time. And with this book in particular, I really, really did look, as I say in the introduction, for another book that was as simple as this. And I didn't find it. I think over the many decades that there have been some books that, were similar to this in their brevity, but I wasn't really able to find anything that did what I had hoped to be able to have. If I had a book like this after Hunter was killed, I probably would have had it in my purse all the time, or maybe my hand or my pocket all the time, because a talisman like that, I think, can be very comforting, and can be a place for grieving people to just sort of let their grief rest.
So this is a book that deals with the first phases of grieving, and I see two of them as I read it. And one is shock, and then there is shock that moves into pain. And I wonder if, I mean, you have a lot of suggestions about how one copes, how one comforts oneself, takes care of oneself in these phases. And I wonder if you could speak a little bit about that transition phase when you move from one to the other.
Yeah, there's a page in the book, and I probably will not be able to find it immediately because that's how it is. It's hard to find them immediately. But basically, the idea is, you know, no, the idea is, you get through the funeral, and then, I mean, the person is still dead. That is the thing that it takes a long time to sit with, to sit in the room with, is that we make these deadlines like, okay, now I have to plan the funeral, now I have to do the memorial, now I have to, and all those steps go through, and that person is still gone, and you are still bereaved. And I think what I say on that one particular page is, what next? How long will this last? And your grief is permanent, and that is hard to hear, and it is hard to hear, but I feel like it has to be said, and that part of the agony of bereavement is coming back again and again and again and again to the permanent absence of that person. And so the way that we find to allow ourselves to still exist with that reality, is what I mean by self-care. And sometimes it's, finding another kind of receptacle for your pain, even briefly. I talk about having an altar where you can have something that was beloved to that person, or a picture of them, or maybe you put a, fresh cookie there every day, or whatever it is. It's a way of taking the pain and putting it, physically, letting an object help you carry it, or letting a place help you carry it. And it doesn't, as far as moving into phases, I think it's not linear for me. It's not even, spiral. It's more, like being in the ocean, and you don't see the shore for a lot of the time, and you don't know when the waves are going to come for a lot of the time. And sometimes you're treading water, and sometimes you're swimming, and sometimes you're floating on your back, because we've heard that's what you do when you can't do anything else and you don't want to drown. It's a lot like that, and it's unpredictable in the way that being in, the ocean is.
So when you were reading just now, I had the same experience as I did when I have read the book a couple of times. When you come to someone is gone and they are never coming back, and the importance of that hit that you take and having to accept it, and then you go into disbelief sometimes, but you always have to come back to it, and how important that is in the whole process of as you say, let it be.
Yeah.
I hear two mantras in the book, and one is let it be, and the other is breathe.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. And, everybody experiences, everyone's grief is uniquely their own. And each bereavement is specific to what your relationship was with that person during life. So, I'm not at all saying, everybody's going to scream, everybody's going to weep. Some people don't. And some, that's fine too. The point being, what you feel, that you get that, you get that, have it, feel it. And that there are no right and wrong ways to grieve. There just aren't. There's just how it feels right to you. So, to be a mirror for that is, I guess, another one of the things I wanted this book to function as, just, to be present with that difficult moment.
So when you talk about how not everybody has been initiated into death of somebody close up, there are times when people just don't know what to say. And I thought of two incidents from my own life that struck me as relevant here. And one was that after my husband died, a colleague who I knew pretty well said, "Oh, you must be feeling this," and she was aiming for empathy, and she had not a clue what I was feeling, and wasn't even able to ask me what I was feeling, and just went on, and it annoyed me. And the other incident was watching a friend of mine who had just lost her husband, who was just starting to move back into the world, um, uh, came to a conversation where this woman said to her, aiming for empathy, "How are you doing?" And her response was, "How the hell do you think I'm doing?" And I think it's really hard for people to thread this needle and to have
Yeah.
any idea. So, from your experience, what do you say now that you've been through all of this? When
Yeah. Well, no, that those are excellent points. And I, I I like to hope that even in moments where I was maybe, stunned and unable to form a response, that what I try to think now is, I first of all, I know that people are coming from a point of love and compassion, or if they don't know me well, they're still coming from a point of love and compassion. I mean, people are trying to be nice. It is a very difficult thing. I can say that the questions that were the most helpful to me were questions that just assumed that I was, grieving. Like I never, like, not how are you, but instead I have one friend who said, "How is your grief today? Like, what level is your grief today?" And I thought, oh, like out of 10, it's an 8, but it was helpful because that that made me not only feel that my grief was seen, but have some kind of way to respond to that question. And I think that also, you know, it's not our job to answer that question and the questions that people may bring to us in any particular way. And I think it's fine to say, I don't know how to answer that, or it's fine to say, I- I'm able to eat breakfast, but then I'm awake all night, or I right this minute I have my feet on the ground and it doesn't always feel that way, or whatever. I think, and also I think it's fine to say, I'm getting by. I mean, you don't have to give them the out of saying, "Oh, I'm fine." "Oh gosh, really great," and you also don't have to, unless you want to, say, like, spill it. You can. It just depends on what but you get to decide. You don't have to. I think a person in grief they should be able to cancel plans at the last minute, with all that, like, miss manners that goes out the window, because you have to measure all the time, like, can I do this right now? And if the answer is no, people either will or won't understand, but you have perfect permission to say, "I'm just sorry, I'm feeling overwhelmed and I can't go on that walk. I know you love me, and we'll plan something else later," something like that. I don't know if that exactly answered your question, but
Well, I'm also curious about what you've learned to say to people who you
oh,
encounter who are in grief.
it's still so hard. I mean, I've thought about it so much because because it's so unique to you, and because um I don't want to make any assumptions for anyone. Um, I mean, I think I try to personalize, that I'm sorry for their loss of their person, because it's their person. Like, I just try to be personal about it, because and for me, you know, I hated when people didn't want to talk about Hunter. I didn't want him to ask, like, too many questions, like, give me the nitty gritty of the night he died. And I had to sort of flee a couple of times when I wasn't ready to have that whole conversation. I didn't have the energy to, and really it wasn't something I needed to do right then anyway. But to be able to just, you know, to sit with that person and help their grief to be seen is I guess what I aim for, and that was what was the most helpful with me. And if it seems like they want to talk about it, they're comfortable talking about their person, like, oh my gosh, do you remember that time that she borrowed the book and then, you know, she didn't want to give it back and I had to ask for 3 years or whatever, and I know she loved that book so much, gosh, I wish I'd just given it to her, or whatever, you know. I think that can be, because the person is still alive to you, even though you're sitting with the fact that they've passed and that they're not coming back. They're still alive to you, and probably they always will be. I mean, that's how it is. It's relationship. The relationship was, so the relationship is.
Since you write poetry and I write poetry, I was delighted with page 73. Would you read it, please?
Sure. Well, I can't remember what's on page 73. Let's find out. Oh, I know which one it is. Right. So it's got a pile of books. Consider poetry. Poetry can crack grief open and smooth it down, howl its depths, name its nuance. And naming something is powerful old magic. And I really believe that. I think, and maybe now that I'm thinking about it, just occurring to me right now, poems are usually pretty brief. You know, maybe that was why, you know, at a certain phase or moment in my grief, I wanted poetry, and, you know, not any poem, but in my little reference section, in the back of the book, good thing I'm in my library, huh? This is one of the books that I recommend. It's called The Art of Losing: Poems of Grief and Healing. And it's a beautiful book, And I just dog-eared the pages that I liked and then went and bought those people's other books, and you know, kind of went from there. And you know, for me, that was helpful. So.
Well, one of the things I love about page 73 is you don't say consider writing poetry or consider reading poetry. You leave it open.
Right.
And I'm curious about how if you wrote poetry after Hunter died.
Yeah, you know, that's really funny, Donna, because and I hope this doesn't take it too far off. I'm trying to do something different at each one of my events. So I hope it doesn't take it too far off. I didn't write a lot of poetry, but I did write some. I tend to be the kind of person, like, you're a person who works at your poetry and works at it every day. You know, when you have something, well, you sometimes, okay. This is just talk across the driveway, neighbor talk. But no, you know, a poem will rise up in me at a certain moment. And I found, like, I talk in the book about anniversaries. Sometimes they're very hard. Sometimes we can find ways to, you know, sort of stage something that helps to support it. But I wrote a poem that on the first anniversary of Hunter's death, and I actually set it aside so that if you ask me about poems, I could read it to you. And I hope I hope it doesn't take us too intense, but I'm going to go ahead and read it. It's called States of Matter. And it is about the last time when our family was able to gather at the funeral home to say goodbye to his body. So that's intense. Spoiler alert. If it's going to make you too sad, go get some tea. States of Matter. And I'm thinking of amniotic sac and body bag, the weight in each and the weight of each, both single purpose. Of feet that kicked and I pressed my palm to feel it, those feet now stilled, draped, the familiar now obscured, irreparably inanimate, urge, compulsion, impulse obsolete, undone, irretrievable. Your hands were kindly shaped by strangers, curved to let my hands once more take hold, but cold, so cold. And when we left you there, heaped with lavender, poised for your immolition, I pressed my frigid palms to my cheeks, my forehead, drinking your cold, craving it, that final physical connection.
Thank you.
That's not the kind of, that, I mean, this little book doesn't go that deep, but I think that we should allow ourselves whatever we need to mark the moments that arise that well up as difficult. And for different people, that's different things. But for me, on the first anniversary of his death, that was what I needed. So
Just going to sit with that for a second. While I was reading page 73, I also thought about mindfulness, which is another thing you mentioned as a way to live through grieving. And it occurred to me how very much poetry and mindfulness are alike in that they're extremely focused on the details of something. And part of the magic, I think, of poetry and of mindfulness is that when you focus on the details and when you name, when you can observe what's going on, it's like the observer on your shoulder is one toe out so that you're not totally consumed by the experience that you're going through. And it gives you a tad bit of perspective. I just wonder if you have thoughts about that.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that that's true when we're writing poetry, but it's also true when we're reading poetry. Because I think that whether it's free verse or more formal, it's a framing device in that it asks us to consider exactly exactly what we're looking at, exactly what we want to say, exactly what we're feeling, and to allow ourselves to be editorial of other things. And I think that, I mean, gosh, that's basically a big way to support ourselves in grief, is of being editorial and editing out the things that don't help us, and being selective and choosing the things that do help us, and trying to let those things tell us what they are. You know, I mean, we don't know that all the time, and we might have a long time when we haven't been able to figure out what's helpful. But, you know, at a certain point, it's like, oh, wow, you know, spraying her perfume on every morning makes me feel better. I feel her close to me. Well, I'm going to do that. You know, what's wrong with that? You know, just sort of, it's by trial and error, finding the ways in which we can prop ourselves up. I mean, it's like if you've ever had massage where they were working on one part of you and they like stuck a bolster, you know, to prop you in that particular position so they could work on your back or whatever. The way for self-care and grief to work is to figure out what those bolsters are. You know, bolsters for me have been magical oils. Bolsters for me have been talking to, you know, a psychic. They have been like having special jewelry, and I talk about that in the book, that, you know, I wear all the time, that just is because of you know, my relationship with Hunter. Nothing he gave me, but there it is, and it has to do with supporting myself, picking up, you know, piling up stones. I mean, there's all kinds of things like that they will not help everybody, but some of those things are going to help somebody. And it's just asking ourselves, wow, you know, what's the most helpful? I've been trying to really focus lately on getting outside every day, even for just a few minutes, and like feeling the air, like feeling the wind or feeling the air, and like the air's on my face, the ground, the earth is under my feet, and just, I might only walk a block or something, but like just being present with that. For me right now, 4 years into my bereavement, that is helpful. It is grounding. It is centering in ways that I sometimes forget to be.
You mentioned tattoos.
Yes, I have lots of tattoos. I had only one tattoo when Hunter was killed, and then I just quickly went bananas. And it's interesting. I think a lot of people do get commemorative tattoos. I have a tattoo, and it's on one of the pages in the book, but I'll just show you right there. It's a little heart, and it says HB. And Hunter, when he was 10 or 11, wrote me this cute little note asking me to sew a button on his shirt. And I will always say, like, my kids all know how to sew buttons. He did know how to sew a button, but he asked me, and then he signed it Heart HB. And I was like, oh, of course I will. And then I saved the note, because anything that's signed Heart HB, how could you not save? And I thought, well, that's something I would love to have, his handwriting on my body. And I have handwriting of Sawyer and Lily, my other kids, also different pictures or whatever, and children's books that were significant to us. I have like a Rosemary Wells Bunny Planet sleeve. So, and I don't know why, but having those things physically on my body and knowing that they will be there the rest of my life, it's like, it's not a direct line like, oh, this has changed me forever, because duh, right? Obviously. But it's somehow a way, again, to take that feeling and put it in one particular place. And it makes me really happy to look down and see those things,
Yes.
I was about to ask you if you have any commemorative tattoos. Am I allowed to ask?
No,
to
I
turn the
don't.
tables. Oh, okay.
I've never had a desire for a tattoo, but I have had altars. Altars were really important for me. And I've written about the people who have died.
Yeah.
Did you notice for you a qualitative shift in your grieving at the year anniversary?
No, I didn't. Part of that is because we had filed a wrongful death suit against Greyhound lines. Hunter was killed by a Greyhound bus on which he'd been a passenger, for those of you in the room who don't know that part of the story. And so that was it was 2.5 years after he was killed that finally went to trial. So I was very much dealing with grief of reliving that night and getting different perspectives. So I had a kind of a different thing I was swimming around in. I feel like what I did find, and even when Hunter's first birthday after he was killed came, and then also the anniversary of his death, that it felt really, really important to me to somehow ritualize these things. And so we invented this little, like, donating children's books to a literacy organization for his birthday, and that was really fun. And we picked out the books, so that was a good thing to do. And then I have this thing I do on the anniversary. Actually, it's the opposite. We do that one on the anniversary of his death, and on his birthday, I leave little surprises at parks. And for me, that's a way to reclaim some of the joy, both of those things, the joy of his childhood and things that he loved. So I haven't yet had an anniversary where I was like, whoa, that snuck up on me and I didn't do anything, because I'm always about, like, having a ritual for it. But I say in the book, you can change rituals from year to year or not. The rituals belong to you. And I think that's really important too. It's not that we need to have a rigid ritual for absolutely everything. And some people, that's not helpful to them at all. And they absolutely shouldn't do it. Do what works for you.
Right. The other thing that comes to mind is that you talk quite a bit toward the end about community, about the importance of being with people who knew this person and being able to talk together about that person and about
Yeah.
experiences.
Yeah, it's really helpful. It's very helpful. And other people who have been bereaved too, I think that initially I just felt this rush of support sort of from the universe. It was like all of a sudden I could feel how many other people were grieving. And it wasn't like anyone said, "Oh, by the way, me too." I mean, some people did, and that was great. But like I could just suddenly, it was like I'd put on these, magic glasses, and I could see how many people were grieving, and it helped me to float, on top instead of being taken under.
Yeah.
So I think we should do Q&A. We've just, as usual, chatted across the driveway.
And will again.
Yes. Kalani, do we have any questions? I hope.
We don't have any questions right now. I have posted where to ask a question here in the Q&A box. So nothing's come in yet. I do encourage our viewers to submit there. I can go ahead and ask a question of my own. I think Donna made reference to that one page 73 about the poetry and what books you were reading, and you made reference to the Art of Losing there. As the bookseller, I guess I can ask also, what other books were you reading during this time?
I'm looking over this way. I was reading a lot of grief books, and a lot of memoirs. I'm looking at it on here right now. For sure, there was a book called The Bright Hour. It wasn't always about losing. I mean, it wasn't always about losing a child, but sometimes it was. Just getting other people's hearing their stories and knowing that they had been able to form a narrative out of this at some point in some way. That was really helpful. And as far as the poetry goes, I really did just go through that book and everybody who I had one or two poems of theirs that resonated. I just, I think I went to Open Books, which is the poetry bookstore here that has like a ton of old, you guys have poetry too, but old books and new books. And I just like would come out with stacks of books of poetry and just let that feed me. And I already have a lot of poetry too. So I dipped back into some of that. But yeah, lots of poetry.
Great. So we do have one question here from Iris, who just wrote, I can imagine giving this book to friends who are grieving. Have you shared this book with others who are grieving? If so, how have they responded?
That's a really great question. I think so too. I think that this is some people will buy it for themselves, but really when you've recently been bereaved, you're probably not going to be, standing in a bookstore, but your neighbor will be, or your sister will be. And I think it's going to be given a lot as a gift. And I've been hearing already from people that they have received it as a gift, and that they've given it as a gift. I have had the opportunity only to give it to one person, a dear colleague of mine at History Link, Cassandra Tate, who has a beautiful book about the Whitman killings that came out last year. It's just absolutely gorgeous. I'm sure you can get it at Third Place Books. She died recently, and I was able to give the book to her husband, and that's the first person. And he very kindly wrote me this lovely note. And I think that it at least with Glenn, it seems to have been helpful. And I haven't given it to anybody else yet who's been bereaved, but I have had people email me through my website and tell me that they were given it and that it was helpful to them. So it's really, really, really great to me to know that it's starting to do that work, because I feel, I said at the beginning that this book, was like wanted to manifest, and I feel like it's because it needed to comfort people, and now there it is, and it's doing that work. So whew, right?
Got another question here from Beck, who writes, what can you say about self-comfort through strong conflicting emotions? I lost my husband of 33 years to alcoholism about a year ago.
The strong conflicting emotions, they are real and they are there. And I think, there are things that there are aspects of bereavement that are pain, and there are aspects that are regret, and there are aspects that are fury, and that it is very expected that all of the different emotions would be present, sometimes all at the same time. And it's difficult and it's confusing. And I am a real advocate. And I wasn't in the beginning because I was like, I could get through this. But I think it's helpful to talk to a bereavement counselor. I think that for me, it was. For some people, maybe not. But there's a lot to sift through, and there's a lot to unpack and try to like see the whole. It's like, you want to see the whole map so that you can try to get an idea of what this new land that you've walked into is. And I think that grief counseling can be a part of helping to understand, the symbols and on this new map. I'm sorry, I'm turning everything into a metaphor. It's impossible for me not to do that, but I hope that answers it a little bit.
Can I jump in here for a second? One of the things that you mentioned in the book is the how difficult it is sometimes to just let yourself be with all of those emotions, because people are kind of afraid of them sometimes and think that they're supposed to feel this, that, or the other thing, and that whatever is really what has to be sat with.
Yes, that's it, exactly. And I mean, it has to be because it is, I mean, there's so many times in our life when we can think, oh, well, maybe, and, okay, I'll try it this way. And it's like the bereavement is permanent. It's a permanent loss. And that's just a big, big thing to learn to be in the room with.
I've got one last question here from a viewer named Lisa, who writes, how long did it take you to write your book? And do you think you will write another about the continued grief journey? Your poem was touching and heart-wrenching.
Oh, thank you. I really did write down little scraps of paper, and it really was at night when I couldn't sleep, or sometimes I would wake up and a phrase would be in my head. And I didn't charge myself with turning this into a book. I just threw those pieces of paper into a basket. And at a certain point, the basket was full, and I thought, well, let's see, how can I arrange these? And the book really did start with that. So I would say, it took a long time, in that this is like the memoir, a book of lived experience. So I wasn't in an archive digging for information like with the other books, but I was living those things. So you could say it took, 10 or 15 years, but in fact, writing the book itself was a really relatively short process. Once I decided what order those pieces of paper needed to go in and sort of conceptualized it. And I was lucky enough that Girl Friday immediately saw what I was trying to do and agreed with me that there was a hole in the market of grief books, a book that would be comforting for people who had recently been bereaved and weren't ready for the workbook or, the giant book with all the text and all of that. That's great. And if that works for you, that is fantastic. And sometimes it works eventually down the road, and that's good too. But yeah, so it went pretty quickly.
I think you touched on it a little bit about Rebekah Nichols's illustrations. I'd be curious about, and I'm guessing this is probably your first time collaborating in that way. I'm curious, like, how that all came about. If you had some input about what you thought the visuals would be like.
I did. I had a lot of input. It was kind of great because on my other books that have photographs, I did all the photo research, and so I had a lot of control with those books too. But with this, I gave Rebekah via the editors at Girl Friday, gave her photographs of things around my house, an altar, a Buddha, my tattoo, my necklace, and she didn't have to use that stuff. But it was like, this is an idea of something. This is like a starting point. And I'll say the very first watercolor illustration in the book, this little one on the page about weeping and screaming. This was a photograph I took at Georgia O'Keeffe's home and studio in Abiquiu, and there's these just amazing, Adobe sort of portals, and I took that and I thought there's something about that that says someone's gone through someplace. I'm on this side and they're on that place, and she was able to turn it into this beautiful watercolor. So I'm really, really grateful to her. I've never met her, and I don't, maybe someday I will, but her contribution to this book is significant for sure.
We have another question here from Claudia, who writes, I haven't heard you mention a husband or partner. Did you go through your bereavement only with your other children, or if you had a partner, how did they influence the trajectory of your book?
That's a great question. Yes, no, I haven't. I almost mentioned my husband because he's down in the basement listening to, we like our phones can't fight. We can't be in the same room while I'm doing the Zoom thing, but he's in the basement watching me on his phone down there. Yeah, no, thank everything in the universe. I did not go through this without the support of my husband, Barry Brown, and our other kids, Sawyer and Lily, who are young adults. We agreed, really. I mean, we're the only people who know what it was like to be Hunter Brown's parents. So we already shared that, and we had gone through many years of his addiction before this like completely blindsiding way that he died. We decided really early on that we would give each other permission to grieve at our own time. Like, I wasn't going to be like, oh, I'm feeling horrible today and Barry's having a good day, so he must not be grieving as much, or or oh, I'm feeling better today, that's terrible, I should be grieving as much as Barry. We were like, we sometimes would remind each other, like, I'm just feeling a lot of grief today, and it's like, okay, so that was good. That was really helpful. And no, all of this has been with his support, and he was the first reader and frequently, rereader of this book and all my other books. So he's essential. Good question.
We had a couple of other comments here. Oh, actually, another question just popped up from Claudia, who also was asking about your previous book, which I guess she had not heard about the opioid addiction. If you wanted to mention real quick, I guess a House on Stilts a little bit more.
Yes. So my last book was A House on Stilts: Mothering in the Age of Opioid Addiction, and it's published by University of Iowa Press. You should also be able to get that through Third Place Books. About the 10 years that Hunter, between the ages of about 15 and his death at 25, struggled with opioid addiction, and where that took our family, and the kinds of excruciating situations into which it thrust us, and the kinds of very difficult position or decisions that disease walked us to. And same thing, I wanted to be a hand to hold to other people who were going through this. And, everyone can say, well, I didn't see it coming, and we didn't see it coming. And, lots of difficult things happen in families, not just addiction, but that was the particular thing that happened to our family, and caused us to re-examine, much about what our expectations and what our assumptions had been. So
yeah, we had two final comments here, which I just wanted to go ahead and share with you as well. Judy just wrote, I think it makes a big difference if it's a life taken unexpectedly, as opposed to seeing someone suffer from long illness. And then we had another comment here from viewer Sari, who wrote, It's a beautiful, honest book, Paula. It's like witnessing my own grief over the last 18 weeks since my daughter Vida died. It's a true gift to all grievers. I was thinking about how different each griever is. So when you were talking about how to help, the word attunement comes to mind. I feel like the work of those around the griever is maybe to try and attune to them, like your friend, how is your grief today? I love that. I also see my grief like a child that needs care. And she writes, thank you.
That's a beautiful way to put it. That's a beautiful way to put it. I'm going
Mhm.
to incorporate that in my message, if that's okay. Thank you.
So I believe we are just about out of time now. Thank you for those great questions that we ended up coming up with some really good stuff there for the Q&A. I want to thank Donna so much for being our moderator for our event this evening. And of course, thank you to Paula. This was a very, very special event. I'm so glad to have been a part of it in some way. I have been sharing the links over in the chat box here of where you can buy our books over at thirdplacebooks.com. So I would love it for you guys to support us as a bookstore, support our authors, make sure you buy a copy of Paula's books here. And on behalf of the bookstore, have a great evening. I will be logging us off here and ending the event. I'll just let our authors have the final words.
Thank you so much. Thank you, all of you. And I'm really hoping that you can help to spread the word about this book, because you know, handing it to somebody or telling them, hey, I know that there's this little book, is going to be what gets this out there into the public. So thank you for that, and please do continue to support your local independent bookstores, and thank you to Third Place Books. I love you guys.
Thanks, Kalani. Bless you, Paula.
Thank you, Donna.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.